What's up? It's David, the emotional optimization coach. And today we're going to be talking about emotional traction. So the topics we're going to cover are: what is emotional traction? Realizing that you've already found emotional traction. We're going to talk about getting a grip, recognizing emotional traction, how to recognize that in your life. Also, we're going to get into intention and action and how that leads to traction. Then we're going to get into using emotional traction to gain emotional momentum. So emotional traction, what is it? Emotional attraction, when we're trying to make a change with our emotions, when we're trying to change a habit, to release an emotion, to start moving in a different direction, to start feeling a different kind of way than we've already been feeling, we're trying to change an emotional habit. And emotional traction is the moment when you're trying to change a habit, when you're trying to change into something different, when you're trying to feel a different kind of way. Say if you're used to feeling sad, or you're used to feeling stressed, or you're used to feeling anxious, and you want to feel different. You want to feel relaxed. You want to feel calm. You want to feel peaceful. You want to feel confident. Anytime when you're making a change like that, there comes a moment when you start to get a grip, when you start to get some traction in the new direction. So if you want to change a habit, if you want to change especially an emotional habit, you have to slow down the old habit and start to create a new habit. So you can think of emotional traction as the moment when you're headed in one direction and you slow down enough. So you're going in reverse and you slow down enough, and then you're starting to move forward. That moment when you start to move forward, when you change direction from reverse to forward, right? When you're getting into gear, when you're getting into drive, and you get a grip on the road, you're starting to make that grip on the road into a new direction. That is the traction moment. That's when you're starting to gain traction in a new direction. So when you're changing a habit, you're changing from always feeling stressed and overwhelmed into feeling calm, confident, peaceful. Well, the moment that you start to feel calm, confident, and peaceful, that's when you're starting to gain traction in the new direction. So that's what emotional traction is. Let's talk about understanding it and how you're already using it. Again, I'm going back to our emotions are a habit. We have a habit of feeling a certain way about something in life. We have our baseline, right? So in order for you to be feeling the way that you're feeling consistently, whatever your emotional baseline is, you've got to realize you got there somewhere, right? You didn't just start out feeling stressed and anxious. It took time to get there. So in order for you to get there, you had to initially have some kind of traction to build up momentum headed in a trajectory to get where you're at right now. So you had to have some traction. You had to continue that traction in a particular direction to build up momentum, which sets you on a trajectory to be where you're at. You can't get from point A to point B unless you have traction, momentum, and trajectory. Okay? So you're already using it. If you're stress, right? Stress, as an example, is not something that you were born into. You weren't born feeling stressed. You were born wanting food. You were born to sleep, eat, and poop, right? That's pretty much what you were born, or what you started with. Then over time, whether or not you got the food, right? Whether or not you got to sleep, whether or not you got to eat, whatever, eat, sleep, and poop, as long as you got those things, your needs met, then you feel good. If you didn't get those needs met, then you start to feel anxious. You start to feel stressed. You're wondering whether or not you're going to survive based on the resources that you got. If you got the resources, if you got your needs met, then you didn't have to worry. You were calm, you were confident, you over time built up confidence that you could get your needs met, right? Your resources would be acquired and you had enough to deal or to do whatever it is you wanted to do. If you had enough to eat, you feel good. If you did not have enough to eat, then you start feeling stressed. You start feeling anxious. You start getting worried that you're not going to have your needs met, which over time builds up into the fears that I'm not going to have enough. I'm not going to be enough. I'm not going to go out into the world. Nobody's going to love me enough to give me what I want. And that starts building up emotions over time, right? A habit of emotions over time. So in the beginning, you didn't really have any control over whether or not you had your needs met, whether or not you got the resources that you needed. As you get older, you do, but realize that you are operating from the old beliefs that were put in place, the old habits that were put in place, whether you were safe, whether you got your needs met, whether you had the resources to survive or not. And you built up habits over time based on that data. Okay. So realize you've already got emotional traction, you've already got momentum, and you've already got a trajectory of where things have been headed your whole life. Okay. So whatever that built up into what you're experiencing right now, in order to make a change, you have to slow down. If you want a different ending, if you want a different emotion, if you want a different habit, you've got to set your direction in a different direction, which gives you a different trajectory. Okay. And then you have to build up momentum in that trajectory, in that direction. Okay. And in order to do that, you have to slow down the old until you can get traction and get a grip in the new direction. Then you have to maintain that momentum. Okay. So how to recognize emotional traction? And why am I saying get a grip? Because if you imagine wheels on a vehicle, right? So the tire hits the road, the rubber hits the pavement, all those things. So if you're headed in one direction and you want to change direction, you have to slow down and you have to turn into a different direction so that you can get traction going in that different direction. So you can recognize emotional traction as the first moment that you make headway, that you get a grip into this new direction. So the first moment that you feel happy, the first moment that you feel confident, the first moment that you feel anything that is headed in a direction that you want to go, or any direction for that matter, but hopefully in the direction you want to go. So when you have an old habit, you're accustomed to feeling a certain way. You're accustomed to your emotions going a certain way when you're triggered, when something sets you off, when something happens in your life. Okay, this is how I normally feel. I get triggered and I respond this way, or I react this way. Okay, that's your trajectory. That's your traction. That's your momentum. That's where it's all headed. If you keep doing the same things and getting the same responses, nothing is changing. So when something does change and you have the same reaction or the same thing that happens in life and you don't have the reaction, that's when you're starting to gain traction. Okay. When you're used to feeling socially anxious, you go out into the world and you feel anxious around people. And then you do some of your internal work, some of your emotional work through some of the buttons, some of the triggers some of the buttons that get pushed when you get triggered. You go back to the root, you work through that, you process through that, and you're like, okay, I'm feeling really good. I had a wonderful moment. And then you go out into the same event that would have triggered you before, and you're not getting triggered. That's traction. That's where you're starting to get that new feeling. Same stimulus, same event outside, but you're having a different reaction on the inside. That's when you can recognize that traction, you're starting to gain traction. You're starting to get a grip on the new direction that you want to go in. Now, it takes time, and you have to continue affirming and practicing the habit of whatever your new emotional direction is. Okay. And then over time, you build up momentum in that direction, headed to where you want to be. And that's emotional trajectory. We'll talk about all these in another video. But for now, understand that you need to create traction, which means you need to slow down the old momentum that's headed in the trajectory that you don't want to go in, so that you can head in the new trajectory, the new direction that you do want to go in emotionally, and then build up momentum, which means traction to get where you want to go, to feel how you want to feel, to live the life that you want to live. So what's happening in your mind? In your mind, we have these old patterns and these old programs. And again, I'm going to say it. You already have traction. You already have momentum, and you've already built up a trajectory of expectation. But in order to get to a new direction, in order to get to a new place, you got to slow down the old and shift into the new. Okay. So in order to do that is first recognizing that inside of your mind, you have these old programs and patterns and things that have happened to you in the past. And because your mind is wired to protect you from the pain of the past, whenever it notices anything out in the world that reminds you of the pain of the past, that's where your mind is going to go. So in order to change that, you have to slow down the old pattern. You have to recognize the old pattern and the old programs and all the things that came from how you were raised, the things that came from what people told you, especially people in authority, what they told you, how you were supposed to live life, how you were supposed to be a good person, a contributing member to society. All of these created a belief system inside of your head that you've been operating from. Now, if you want something different, you've got to look at those old patterns, those old programs, and dig them up from the basement, from the closet of unresolved emotions, as I call it. You got to bring it out. You got to look at it, and you got to ask yourself, is this how I really want to feel? And are these the beliefs that I believe in? Are these the beliefs that I want to continue believing in? Okay. Do I believe that I'm a good person, or do I need to believe that I'm a bad person because I did X, Y, and Z? Because I was told that I was a bad person because somewhere in the past I did X, Y, and Z, and they didn't like it. So they put it on me and made me feel bad for doing X, Y, and Z, when X, Y, and Z might be very good for you. But you got to look at it and analyze it, and you've got to look at it consciously. You've got to be conscious with these old patterns and old beliefs so that you can change them. You've got to look and see, is this what I want to believe now? Is this what I want to continue believing for the rest of my life? And is this helping me to get where I want to go? If I want to go to happiness and peace and confidence and all the good stuff that we want to feel, you got to look at the beliefs that are holding you captive to the old feeling, the old stress, anxiety, overwhelm, all those feelings, right? So in order to get new traction, you've got to head in a different direction. You've got to want to be going in a different direction, and you've got to build up momentum to get there. You've got to work on your old unresolved stuff so that it's no longer guiding you, so that you can guide yourself, okay, with a new belief system that does work for you. So shifting gears in your mind and creating a new story, realizing that you are using emotional traction to gain emotional momentum over time. So in order to shift the gears in your mind, you've got to look at where you're headed. You've got to look at what you're reacting to. You've got to bring those old emotions, those old memories, those old stories to the surface of your mind, process through them, work through them, give yourself a couple minutes. It doesn't take a long time, but just a couple minutes to feel what you couldn't feel back then. Let's say, for example, you had something that happened when you were 5 years old, and your mind is still reacting as if you're 5 years old to whatever triggers that memory, whatever triggers those emotions from that memory. So in order to shift the gears in your mind, you got to give yourself the freedom to go into it for a couple minutes, release the emotions that are there that you couldn't back then, you couldn't process back then, you couldn't process the feelings back then, but give yourself a couple minutes now, process the thing, and then create a new story. Create a new story where you go back to whatever that child self is, whatever that younger part of yourself is. Go back, give yourself what you thought was missing, give yourself what you needed back then, and create a new story. Because what you're doing in your mind is you're giving it a new electrical impulse inside of your brain that's positive instead of negative. You know the difference. You're not changing the memory itself. You know what actually happened, but you don't have to respond with the same emotions from that moment that got stuck. So releasing the emotion, discharging the emotional impulse, the emotional charge, the electrical charge inside of your brain, creating a new story so that next time that button gets pushed inside of your brain, it goes to the good feeling instead of the bad feeling, which helps you to gain traction and momentum in the new direction, the new trajectory that you want to go in. And then you keep doing that over time. And before you know it, you're feeling good instead of bad in the same situations that would have made you feel bad. That's how you start to change a habit. That's how you start to change an emotional habit, by discharging the emotion, giving yourself a storyline inside of your mind to release it, let it go, rewrite it, rewire it, and move forward. So what are your next steps for better emotional traction and a more authentic, aligned, and fulfilled life? I've got some free resources. I would love to give them to you. Let me know if you're interested. Drop a comment below, hit me up, whatever it is that you need. I want to thank you for hanging out with me, but most importantly, for leveling up your life, your skills, and taking everything to a whole new level. Thank you for that. I appreciate that more than anything. Thanks for hanging out with me, and I'll see you